Okay, so if you are on the call, you should be seeing, if you're using the visual part of the presentation online, you should be seeing the first slide says computer literacy to assist child welfare programs. The start time is 9 a.m. I've got a few technical things to accomplish on this side, so you probably hear some things going on in the background, but we will start right at 9. Thank you. those online, we have just about another 10 minutes or so before we'll get started. Sorry, hopefully you can hear me. I just realized I hit the mute button there. So this topic that we're looking at, computer literacy to assist child welfare programs, is a conglomerate topic of several concept areas that were showing up in the needs assessment survey. And some of those were relative to computer software, some of them were relative to online social media and how all of that works. So as we go through the presentation, I can hear you. If you have questions, please feel free to ask those questions, and we'll get started here. So if my mute button was off or was on earlier, my name again is Raquelle Myers. I go by Kelly. The role that I serve in this project is project manager, project director. I do a little bit of the training, but we've tried to make sure that we've had all the best consultants that we can find on the topics. So this program is part of the Native American Children's Training Program, NACTF. Make my own computer work here. There we go. And the goal of the NACTF program is that we are able to create and distribute training materials, training courses. And we do a lot of that through what we call blended classroom work, where we have a training session that's live, and we also record the presentation. The presentation will go on to the NACTF website. If you go to NIJC.org and you click on projects, you'll find NACTF, Native American Children's Training Program there, and you will be able to see all of the available trainings. Some of them are based in MOODLE. Some are references to resources that are online. And, of course, if you have any questions at all, we can help hook you up with folks that are in the field to assist. So when we look at the agenda for today's presentation, we have a few topics. As I said, these were from the needs assessment survey that people were interested in learning just a little bit more. So the scope of this presentation, because it's online and because we're going to be doing this kind of a one-way delivery system because I can't see your computers when you're online, we will be looking at PowerPoint, Excel, the MOODLE online classroom, ReadyTalk, the social media program, and then some Excel managing the program budget items that were specifically requested. So I don't expect that we will go all the way until 2 p.m., and if there are any questions, like I said, please ask them, and don't worry, we will do some editing after this presentation is done, probably to insert some screenshots or videos, and we can edit out questions, or unless your question is something that will help everybody, then we'll ask you if we can leave it in. So our first topic is on PowerPoint, and I kind of believe in starting where we are at here at the beginning, and the use of PowerPoint. So why, when, and how to use PowerPoint. The goal is to inform people using PowerPoint, and oftentimes there are some strict rules about trying to keep the information on a slide down to a minimum. But you really have to know your audience. What is your audience there for, and how does your audience learn? There are a lot of online sources about adult learning styles, but for a lot of people who work in child welfare, you may have dual audiences. You may have people who are involved in the administration of your program. You may have presentations for education, and you may have presentations for young audiences. So your PowerPoints may have to be adjusted to fit those audiences. And just as a simple example, imagine the attention span that you'll have with a lot of young people in the room versus a lot of adults. And if you shoot in the middle of that audience range, you have young people now who are device dependent. So your information really has to catch their eye if you're going to present visually. And anything that you're presenting through audio means they can split their attention and look at their device while listening to you. And while that may seem like they're not paying attention, it really is a new era. We have to really work with people who are multitasking at almost 24/7 type of rate. So your information on your PowerPoint, the suggestion has been made that you don't put in more than 3 bullets. And so I've already violated that rule here on the slide. And that you make sure that your presentation time per slide is not more than 3 minutes. So you want to be able to move those slides very quickly. The goal here is keep your audience engaged in the information that you are trying to transmit. And sometimes the best way to do that is to make sure that your audience is absorbing the information as you go along. So when it comes to presentation styles with PowerPoint, you want to have a very good mixture of questions about the content on the slide or directional conversation that takes you to the next slide. So another good use for PowerPoint besides presentation of education information is that it is a great source for creating complex charts and graphs, and particularly organizational charts. For a lot of the proposals that are made to any sort of state or federal agency, they'll request an organizational chart, and doing that in PowerPoint can not only be easy, but it's also colorful. You can create design, and it's then easy to modify if you have any changes. So when we talk about PowerPoint as a tool for an organization, you also want to keep in mind that your PowerPoint may be useful for somebody else to present. And so having speaker notes within the PowerPoint is a really good idea. It helps people to take the information that you're presenting and helps to fill in the gaps that exist between slides, those conversation points, or sometimes what I like to call quizzing points. The speaker notes you're able to view those in presentation mode. You can choose to view the speaker notes on your own screen so that you don't have to have the notes printed in front of you, and your audience will only be seeing those presentation slides. When you go to print those notes, however, you have to be careful not to print them along with your slides. It can sometimes be 1 or 2 sentences that will then use an entire page and push your slides into longer pages. So as we move through some of the tools for PowerPoint, you should know that you can embed video, you can embed audio, you can embed links so that as you're going through your PowerPoint, you can click on links or start audio and video without really leaving the PowerPoint presentation itself. And probably the one thing that we should all remember is that this is not an advertisement for Microsoft. There are a number of other programs out there that are taking presentation styles to the next level. PowerPoint is keeping up with those to a certain degree, but with each one of these next ones that I'm about to give you some information on, and we'll test out my skills for embedding these links and see what happens. The visual part of presentations has really stepped up quite a bit. If you're not a PC user and you are an Apple user, their program for presentations is called Keynote. It has become very interactive with PowerPoint, meaning that you can save a PowerPoint in Keynote format or you can present PowerPoints directly from Keynote. Other programs such as Prezi are very highly specific in their presentation style. So the Prezi presentations are organized as slides on your computer, but they really, when presented, are pictures that will have different animations as they move into the screen. And when they move into the screen, you can create different animations and even a little text, but it is picture oriented. The text in the presentation is left to the presenter. And for people who are visual learners, and that is a lot of adult learners, this is a very effective presentation style. But as with anything, those presentation styles can get tedious over time, so you may just want to mix what you're doing and how you're doing it. So if you're going to make effective use of a visual presentation tool such as one of these, you really need to know your subject matter because the text will not be on the screen for you to cite from. You need to know your audience. Is your audience text dependent? Do they need to see the visual text along with the visual picture? But when you decide that you can speak to what you see on the screen, if it is a picture, and that you have no problem with that, then your visual tool can really have a high impact. Anything that's graphic and that moves in this day and age tends to catch our attention. I'm going to take a moment here and click on the link that I embedded into this PowerPoint and see if we can pull up the Prezi demonstration, give you a chance just to see. Actually, before I do that, let me not cover up the other two. Visme and Haiku Deck are two additional presentation alternative tools to PowerPoint. But let's try Prezi first and see if we can make that one work. Okay, we've got the link to work, and now we have to find presentation demonstration. It's always a good idea to make sure you got the link right. Somehow I went straight to the pricing instead of the demonstration. So we're going to click the See How It Works button. Make sure that we got sound. Okay, and this is the demonstration. So they're showing you various slides that they've created. And over here on the left, you can see they're created similarly to PowerPoint. But when you hit the play mode for these slides, and I'll show you here in a second, you'll have items that will fall into the picture as if they are layers. And you have the chance to create animation within each area of text. So they're going to give you a demonstration here on creating this slider that will create the additional graphic circles and then have those move all at once. So they're going to show clicking on the trends. If I can make sure that you can see that full thing. And every now and then when it scrolls through and you can see those slides on the side as to how it created what you're viewing, will give you an idea that it's very automated. It's very full of motion. So if you want to see more about Prezi, I would suggest that you go to Prezi.com. And I like this one just because it really has a lot of tools for it. And the presentations that I have seen where people have used Prezi have been very good. Oops, sorry, bear with me here as I get back to our presentation. So the next one is Visme, and these are the ones that rated highest in terms of the alternatives to PowerPoint. I'll give you some idea here as to what they look at. So this one is graphic intensive. It really looks at the idea of building out from templates. So they will start with a lot of very, very high graphic oriented templates that you can go in, exchange your own pictures for. And this is one of their videos to show how their presentation works. Sorry about the noise. I'm going to take the music down a little bit and do a little narrative over that. So this Visme has been used primarily for advertisements and for what we'd call an infographic to relay information, particularly data, in graphic manners that are less chart-oriented and more visually oriented. So, charts are great and they explain a lot, but when you have an infographic that turns that chart into more of a visual, like a mountain, or data that's presented in a visual style, it gives you just a chance to engage your audience just a little bit more. Okay, go back to the presentation and let's start with the haiku. Take that and all the way down. And haiku is being used probably a little bit more than Visme in terms of the ratings that I saw. Haiku also does the template, but a lot of its templates are located in the cloud. So you quite honestly are using online tools. They're being created a little bit more rapidly than the updates for the standards like PowerPoint and Keynote, which are programs that you buy and keep on your computer. These ones you'll log in, you'll choose templates, you'll go into a mode where you're looking at use of their graphics, use of their templates, and if you have your own pictures, you may have to know how to layer out those pictures and change those images. So this is an interesting presentation here that I actually have used in the next slide from Haiku. And it's basically a demonstration as to whether graphics and fonts really matter, and they do a before and after for a slide. And what I thought was interesting was that for my own learning style, the after picture with the graphic behind it, it catches my attention, but it also is a bit of an inhibitor for the text for me. So there are certain things that we all may be used to, and you may have to have other people take a look at your slides just to let you know how they are learning from that information. I don't think there's good or bad. There just is whether or not your audience is engaged. And so making sure that you get a test member from your own audience to take a look and tell you how they feel, is this slide engaging or is this slide too busy, can help you tailor your presentation for the best impact. Okay. So what we're seeing with regard to the presentation tools is the trend to have them cloud-based platforms, which means those online accounts. The pricing ranges quite a bit, and some of them can be very expensive. The more templates that they provide to you, sometimes the more expensive they can be because they have to get licensing for those images. However, when you're using PowerPoints or anything that's resident on your own computer, you have to be careful about pulling images from the internet, especially when these templates become very popular. You'll have people who have the account, they are licensed. People who do not have the account won't be licensed. The positive aspect of having cloud-based platforms is that they're available across multiple devices. So your PowerPoint presentation may be very good for a laptop presentation or an in-classroom presentation through a projector, but it may not be great on a cell phone or an iPad. So the next step is making sure that you have a program that exports to a variety of formats if, in fact, you need to put them into Apple devices or into PC devices that you may not normally use. The next aspect to the cloud-based platforms is the share and collaboration. You can send those files to others. They can review them online freely. They may not be able to make too many edits or suggestions if they don't have an account, but they can see them. Probably the only real downside is the balance between the graphics, the videos, particularly any 3D images. They take a lot of memory to run, and so you end up in a situation where it's very difficult to share those videos through an email. You'd have to create links or have them put into a YouTube format or some other visual format that somebody else can access. Okay. The next area that we were looking at that questions came up for were Excel. And for this particular area, we'll probably be looking at some small examples that I fit into the PowerPoint, but we will edit in some video of creation of different formatting, cell formatting to do calculations. So the things that came up were making sure that budgets that were done in Excel were self-calculating. And so we looked at some of the formulas for calculating line items and created some templates for budgets versus actual that go across multiple spreadsheets. And when you have the multiple spreadsheets, creating those calculations is not difficult, but you just have to make sure that you don't change out too many of your formulas or cells so that your formulas stay correct. And then the other big usage or request for information was on charts to express any sort of data in a chart format. So when we're looking at any sort of programmatic budget, especially for the federal government programs, and this is similar to states, the categories are rather standard. You start with your personal salaries or wages, have the fringe benefits, you have the equipment, and the notes here in the center are for the calculation purposes. You have travel, which can be broken down into several subcategories, supplies, other, and indirect costs, if you have an indirect cost rate. So, for example, for the salaries, you want to make sure that you understand how to calculate what it is that you are calculating for that particular budget proposal. You'll have a rate per hour times a certain number of hours for that specific person to commit to the project. For fringe benefits, you may want to go with a very specific percentage per individual of their salary or wages. And then a note for the equipment. For most of the federal budget, equipment is an item that is over $5,000, so $5,000 and 1 penny. If it's under $5,000, it is actually under the supplies section. So you just want to make sure you are checking all of those calculations as dictated by the request for proposals. So this would be a simple table. And if we were to do this in a word processing type of software, we would create the subheadings under each one of these headings, list out the names of the individuals, their rates per hour, times by the hour, and we would add in the totals by hand. But if you are using Excel, you can create formulas in the cells that can actually create the calculation for you. So you would create your, I'm going to go back just a second, create your table in Excel very similar to this. We would add a subline below, and for our first individual, we would want to know what their rate is. And in Excel, you can create what are drop-down selections. So you would create a series of boxes, and it could be on a separate page, and you would put in the person's name, and then you would put in their rate next to their name in another cell. And when you wanted to choose that particular rate, you would select that person, and it would show up in the cell. So I'm going to go back to our calculation here. So, for example, for the budget for June, and it shows 400. A budget for July shows 200. We reach that item by setting up a calculation here above. These items over here are just showing you how to enter in those functions into those cells. So, for example, for the budget for June, we can write in 400. Budget for July, we can write in 300. On the total budget, rather than just enter a number that is 700, we enter the formula. And the formula is an addition formula, the addition of this cell to this cell. And we create that formula by showing first the operator, which is the equal sign, pardon me, click that slide. And then we select the first, pardon me, I've got a touch pad here that is very sensitive. So we would enter in the 400, enter in the 300, and then our cell to do the calculation has the operation of equals cell B1, which is the 400, plus our operator of addition, B2. And when we hit enter, that cell now contains that formula, and it'll show it up here. This is the formula bar. And it will automatically add the two numbers in B1 and B2. Now, for a simple addition like this is probably not a very big help or a time saver for you. But if you had multiple rows with multiple numbers to be added, and you change one of those numbers or you want to enter additional numbers, then having the calculation calculate on its own is extremely helpful. This example up here is just an example of how to create a cost per square foot using a division. So this could be helpful if you want to create what is essentially a sheet that just does that function. You can add numbers into it and get your immediate total per square foot. So these are just simple examples that are, things that will help you understand how to put the calculation into the cell. When you get to a point that you are putting in a lot of numbers, instead of using simple operations like this, you can use more complex operations that say equal the sum of B1 and then semicolon to the last field, which could be B12. And it will do the summation for all of those. Excel is very, very, it's very detailed in the types of calculations that you can do, and it will go into more complicated math calculations. It has a lot of financial calculations because it's used for accounting most often, but you can probably create more scientific calculations dealing with calculus and different types of algebraic formulas as well. Hopefully you don't need those to do your budget. Okay, when you're creating charts, Excel is very, very good with preset charts or templates. And if you have a set of data and you have established your categories, and this is an example from a website that has very good tutorials for Excel, and we have those resources listed, I believe, in the next slide. You can pull, this is an example of sales of books. You can pull that data and put it into an x-axis and y-axis type of labels. So in this particular instance, we're showing that we want to see the sales annually for each category of novels or each category of books. So all you really need to do is select that data. And these colored lines here will show you can either just select the numbers, or you can select the entire thing showing the categories as well as your annual indications. So this first one shows a straight bar chart that establishes its own scale for numbers on your y-axis and uses your x-axis annual year indicators. And it pulls these y-axis numbers based upon averages, highs, and lows from your data. And you can see here it puts in the legend. So once you have your data in, you select the data you want charted, and then you select your chart type, and it becomes extremely easy. So you always want to go back and double check that you're seeing the data reflected the way that you'd like it to be reflected. So a bar chart shows you sales, and you can compare sales over time. This type of chart here is a trend chart that shows you a better visual of the highs and lows of the sales. So rather than comparing them by each dollar amount, you're comparing them over time and what were the highs and lows and the trends that were being purchased at the time. So we have a peak in the romance novels, and we have a decrease, a sharp decrease between 2014 almost across the board. So although these are novels and we may not be so interested in that for child welfare programs, if you were showing expenses for case management or showing expenses for training, this would be a very similar chart. You could show or compare categories. So if you were to look at the amounts that you had for, let's say, training staff, and then compare that for, the idea of staff retention, how many people were kept and how many people's possibly satisfaction with their job was tied to any sort of activity, whether it was training or off-site events or those kinds of things, can help explain how your office works to anybody who's funding it. Now you can go more specific and show case management expenses and then compare that to outcomes. So how much time is spent on a particular case, and show where, the more time is spent, maybe the outcome is dramatically better. Or maybe it's not. Maybe that needs to be explained too. Data can be used to explain a lot of the things that we are engaged in the administration of child welfare programs. So it's something to keep in mind. And simple charts and the ability to use them are important. And like I said, you always want to have somebody else look at it. If, for example, you did not collect all of the columns, maybe you had, 2013 through 2015, somebody else may see that and say, wait, where's your more recent data? When you're doing trend analysis, you want to have as much data over the number of years as possible. Okay, let's move from there. And like I said, for these examples, we'll have video segments that will be edited in or available in the Moodle Classroom, which takes us to the slide on the Moodle Online Classroom. We put this slide in primarily because we want to make sure that everybody understands it as a tool. There are a couple of classroom platforms. Moodle is one that is used a lot by nonprofit organizations and different types of organizations. Government organizations have a tendency to use one that's called Blackboard, and it just has varying security levels and enrollment requirements. The Moodle Online Classroom allows you to create lessons. It has multimedia content that can be added to it. It allows you to conduct pre- and post-tests for your lesson plans, and you can have certificates that the students can print out. It does have an interactive platform with it in that you can have a live teacher who's monitoring any sort of class assignments and questions, as well as having an asynchronous platform where you can have people leave questions that you can get to during the next business hours. So it can be used in a lot of different formats. You can just leave it as an online course and have people email you as questions come up as well. We use the Moodle Classroom for a number of different online courses, and there is a computer literacy Moodle course that is within our classroom. So we highly suggest that you take a look into that. And I am not going to click this link, but the link that you have there will get you to the classroom. So it's https://www.nijcservices.org. Sorry, that's www.nijcservices.org/NIJC room. Once you go there, you'll see the introductory page that we have for the classroom. To access any of the courses, if you've not already done so, just send us your email and a request to access, and you'll receive a password to access the courses. The courses vary. We have the courses that are affiliated with the NACTF program. There are also courses about transportation, environmental concerns. There is a tribal government civics course that we have, which has the fundamentals in history behind federal Indian law. There's a lot of information there, so feel free to take a look at the topics and just let us know if you're interested in something that isn't already open and available. And no cost for these courses. These are all courses that we really just want to make sure the information is out there and available to everybody. Okay, so if you get into the Moodle Online Classroom and have questions, don't hesitate to give me an email. A lot of it is very self-explanatory. We've had folks on our project team, particularly Christy Garcia and Ben Myers, who have done great work at creating frequently asked questions pages and providing instructions and guidelines on approaching the various courses. One of the tools that we use quite often is this ReadyTalk web conferencing that I'm using with you today. The ReadyTalk web conferencing is just one of many web conferencing platforms. There are others. Another one that we've been using most recently is called Zoom, and it allows for video communication so that you can literally have the conference go on your screen. There is a difference between web conferencing versus conference calls. With web conferencing, you're really looking at an established platform to use to transmit information. So you might have a person who is the person who's controlling the call, controlling the content of what's being seen. The conference calls, on the other hand, are more collaborative. And the collaborative nature of the calls, you may want to be able to see everybody visually. Zoom is very good for that. You can use video from your laptop or your desktop, and everybody can show themselves the way they would like to. You can also have multiple screens that can be transferred control. So I could transfer my screen to another person on the call, and they could show what they have on their desktop. For ReadyTalk, it is dependent upon kind of a more of web conferencing than the interactive conference calls. You can share control of the screen, but it really is just one screen. So one computer really has to start the conferencing and contain the slides and the content for the webinar. The nice part about it is that you can create presentations that can be recorded, and the recordings can be downloaded so that you can then share them at a later time, and they can be edited with some simple software. A lot of the tools that we use for editing are basically Microsoft-based tools that come with the Microsoft suite, so you haven't had to really purchase anything or get anything new to add to the content of the presentation. There are a number of free platforms that are available now for conference calls and web conferencing. And it leads us to another topic that I didn't put into the slide, just something that I'm thinking about on my feet here, and that is collaborative work environments. And so we've been using programs like Dropbox and Basecamp. Some of those you may be familiar with. Some of them can carry with them some large pricing. And the aspect that is always going to be a concern for child welfare programs will be that you're not putting any information into those collaborative platforms that is confidential. However, if you have educational materials that you want to share, particularly between tribal and state organizations, you may want to check and see whether or not those organizations can access those types of collaborative programs. Sometimes there are protocols about not using those sorts of tools. The benefit of the programs are that you can do collaborative building of documents, you can share information, and you can have task lists that as they are completed, the task list gets checked off, the item is announced to everybody, or if any changes are made to a document, that announcement is made so you know when it's your turn to then contribute. I have to admit that when we have very complex projects, that Basecamp has been extremely useful and beneficial tool. When we are doing what is kind of a longer-term build-out of documents or collaborative drafting, Dropbox is just as good. And Dropbox is like having a directory in the cloud that you can access with multiple devices, and then you can share those folders with somebody else who can then access them. You can limit their access to the documents, to editing or just viewing. With Basecamp, you can really create larger groups and a lot more tasks can be done. So with Basecamp, it may require a little bit more monitoring, or you may just want to make sure it's very specifically used for anything that is non-confidential. With the Dropbox, you have a little bit more control, and its presumption is that you will have smaller groups that will be involved in it. So good thing to know. Now, there is issues concerning security with regards to computers that came up, and that's one of the things that we're kind of pivoting here with Dropbox and Basecamp is that the items that you put into those can be locked. So you can put in documents that are password protected so that even if somebody did get into your Dropbox without permission, they may not be able to open the document. And so every program, particularly word processing programs, has a different structure for adding a password to protect the document. Probably the most complex one that is seen is through Adobe and use of Acrobat. If you were working in a government agency, you may have already seen these, or if you work with a government agency, you may have seen these. When you have an Adobe document, and we see this quite often with the Federal Register, you can download the document, you can view the document, you can print the document, but you can rarely do markups of the document where you highlight something in yellow and then share it. It doesn't like to save any changes to an official document, which is completely understandable. So just know that there are varying degrees that you can actually do in Adobe Acrobat, where you can protect the document from being printed. You can protect the document from being saved as any name so that you always retain your original document and its format. Okay, and that'll take us into the Internet social media safety discussion. For child welfare programs, the purpose of this discussion is not really for the adult users. It's for the young people that you may be working with and knowing and understanding where they may be accessing their content. Well, many in my generation are familiar with the older platforms like Facebook and Twitter. Some of the newer platforms are very brief and may be unknown to you. A lot of these programs are apps, and they're contained on phones and devices as well as on computers. So where we used to be worried about people going online, we would check their internet history and see where they've been. We really now need to get into these programs and into various devices to make sure that we're able to see who they've been interacting with. And there are a lot of predators on these sites. And when we feel secure and think that we have just figured out Facebook or just figured out Twitter, there'll be a new application that comes up and you'll have to get to know it. So some of the common applications are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. Those may be the ones that you are familiar with. And a lot of those convey information through pictures, through video, through text. But many of them have direct messaging, which means that there are private conversations that are occurring between members of the platform. That's okay. You tend to expect that those members would actually want to have those communications. No, I think we're okay until I get down to some of the gaming ones. So, yeah. Sorry, I have my younger generation in here who has got more experience with these, so we might have him take over on this aspect. So when you start to look at user content, you also want to make sure you're looking at the direct messaging. So, for example, if you're a user of Facebook, there is a program called Messenger that Facebook uses internally to send these direct messages. So it's not even just through Facebook. It's an alternative program that can be invoked by Facebook. So there are also live streaming, and that means that you can actually turn your application on, it goes live, and any of the followers will get a message that somebody has gone live, and they can watch what is being streamed in terms of content. And we've seen a number of people do very stupid things under very stupid conditions where they will live stream somebody who might be drinking who's underage or, smoking marijuana, and they shouldn't be doing that, and not understand that everybody who is following them will get the message that they live streamed. And if that recording is saved on their timeline, it can be viewed over and over. So for those adults who have had these apps and have saved content, you also have to understand that this stuff is searchable. So there's so many users in Facebook, you have settings that can keep your account private, but a lot of people have not put those settings to good use. And so people will be searched when they're applying for new jobs, and interesting things will come up, and you might have questions about things that you thought were never going to happen. So I'm going to turn this over to Ben right now, and he will talk about a live stream program called Twitch, and then go through the rest of the bullets on this page. Thanks, Ben.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name's Ben Myers. Like Kelly, I'm also a staff attorney with the National Indian Justice Center, and I'll kind of jump right in. So kind of the counterpart to some of these other live programs is a program called Twitch, which is actually a very large company that was bought by Google recently. And their primary function is to provide a platform for live streaming. Now, that's mostly people live streaming themselves, playing video games. There's a chat function. There's a function for people to donate money to these streamers, which is usually how they make profit off of this. There's also a lot of charity events and things like that. So it's more for a video game-oriented community, but in the past few years, we've seen it kind of branch out into people using it for all kinds of different purposes, mostly discussion, any kind of news topics, things like that. So people are kind of branching out and taking advantage of the live elements of that platform. And going kind of hand in hand with that on the next bullet is a few different chat functions on game consoles. Now, you can actually access Twitch on your gaming consoles. So it's another avenue for people to use, and it's relatively easy. It's it's a couple of button pushes, and you're live streaming your room and your game and your voice on the internet, and it's not regulated. It's not locked to certain users unless you make those settings, unless you enable those settings. So really, you could even by accident stumble into one of these things, and then suddenly you're live on the internet for everyone to see. On top of those functions are voice and video chat functions that are installed directly into these consoles. Now, again, as with Twitch, a lot of that was used initially for people playing video games to communicate with each other live, but we've seen in recent cases, the United States has actually found that terrorist groups have used PlayStation Chat to share messages because no one's watching that avenue. So people are sending, more dangerous messages on there. But on the flip side of that, something that's probably more relevant to the common user is that you could be talking to someone on one of these platforms and you don't know who they are. A big theme of this is that these applications are free and you can access them on your phone, so you don't need to have one of these $300-400 consoles to be involved in this chat. So that really opens up the floor to you being able to talk to just about anyone, which is a huge concern, especially as a parent, but more so in these roles where you're working with children. There's a lot that goes on that you may not know about in these kind of chat avenues. So being aware of that and being aware that, you don't know who's on the other side. I'm sure Kelly's touched upon that, but that's kind of the big theme with a lot of these. Moving on, we talked about Twitch as a possible service, but there's also an app called Discord, which is very similar in the sense that it's kind of a private server which can be open to the public, where you can leave text, video, voice chat messages for people. It's a lot of times used now for discussion boards on certain topics. But again, you don't know who's on the other side. You don't know what kind of content you're going to walk into. You could walk into any number of awful videos or awful messages. Bad things can be said here. You really just don't know unless you're aware that people are on these platforms, what they could be talking about. And these kind of avenues are where cyberbullying can happen away from the mainstream. So they're really good things to be aware of. And just to kind of round it all out with the other category, these three that I put down here are more video chat applications, but they have text chat as well. Skype is a pretty well-known one. People use that for internet calls, international calls, long distance, things like that. Rabbit is actually a similar service with the video chat that allows people to watch videos or share their screens live so that everyone in the chat room can see something at the same time, which people use to watch the same movies or TV shows, but it can also have a lot of other functions, and functions that we may not know about that lead to some of the concerns that we have. And finally, one of the other ones I've seen, and it's been a while since I've seen it on the internet, but it's pretty horrific at times, is chat roulette, which is basically a video chat service that allows you to chat with a random person, and you can hit a button that allows you to just keep chatting with different people, and you never know who it is. A lot of the times it's people live streaming something that's highly inappropriate and worrisome for anyone working with youth or just normal law-abiding people. So it has kind of some disturbing functions and disturbing content. So it's something that you should be aware of. Again, it's something I haven't seen in a while, but that could just mean it's evolved into something else. So it's really being aware of something like that. And so, did you want to take this one? Or?
Yeah, I can go from here. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, so in terms of working with child welfare programs and children and youth in general, the concerns about the social media platforms is that it is actually a new risk-taking venture, and we're faced with issues such as this chat roulette where you are actually figuring out a way to experiment in talking with strangers, and yet the people on the other end of this may not necessarily be without skill sets involving predation on children, grooming of children. So it is important that you understand and that the families understand that these platforms that are being so commonly used are now environments in which predation has been occurring and is unfortunately successfully occurring regularly. So the big issues are we don't always know who the kids are talking to on the other end of these platforms. The kids don't know who they're talking to. The platforms aren't designed to always show you exactly the person that you're speaking to. Pictures can be put into the profile so that you think you're talking to whoever is being presented in the picture. And we may have become very skilled at recognizing that that could be a lie, that somebody has posted something that's false information. But children, every generation is going to learn the hard way with these tools. And so children are still getting caught up in the cons that are occurring. The tools are easy to access. You can access them for free in most instances, and you can access them on a phone. And children are getting phones younger and younger, and they're learning how to access these platforms. A lot of time we think that we would be able to know what they were doing because we would see a charge come up on some form of an account, or there would be some sort of notification. Very rarely now are there apps or sites out there that really check on when somebody checks the box that says they're 18 or older or 21 years and older. There's no verification for that. And then the last bullet here is social media is still growing, and it's growing in massive strides. New platforms are being created. They're being engaged in other activities and other software in ways that we haven't really thought about before. Like I said, with the Dropbox and with the platforms for collaborative work development, those can all be used for purposes that would not be great, to hold pictures that would be a violation of the law that allows other people to access them. So while we would think that those platforms would have no negative connotations, they can be used in negative ways. And as they get integrated into everything, my favorite lately has been integration of that kind of networking into exercise equipment and the Peloton bikes. You have video screens in which you are part of a group that are all watching the same workout and doing the same workout, and there is two-way communication through those. So always a good idea to know and understand how you're being drawn into a platform, what it's asking for, and then how to protect yourself. There are settings in each and every one of these platforms that you can use to reduce the amount of predation that occurs, reduces the amount of information that is shared. And while that may not get you the greatest number of followers, it will keep kids safeguarded. So we have to start teaching them about the issues that we're concerned about, that people may take advantage of them, and maybe they can share with us how to set those settings. A lot of the kids understand this a lot better than our adults do. So don't hesitate for a moment to engage them and ask them what their current app usage is, where they feel that they have been threatened or at risk, and how they would help other younger people to safeguard themselves. And they can be your greatest allies in this particular battle. So we come to the last slide, and we just want to thank you for participating and listening in with us. And from this point forward, we will take the video and we will do some editing, and it will be posted in the online platform that we use, the MOODLE platform under the NACTF program.